So everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'd like to get started. One of the things we like to do with Money Lines for Friday calls is bring the people that are helping us guide or steward your money. First Trust is one of those companies that we really enjoy talking to. They're a phenomenal partner with us. They've actually given us the opportunity to speak with Andrew Updike today. Andrew's a CFA from class of 2019, if I remember correctly. He's a senior
Yep.
financial analyst at First Trust, one of the guys that we listen to a lot. We really appreciate their opinion. So we're going to kind of just jump into it with kind of a heavier topic today. We got a bunch of bullet points that we're going to go through, but one of the topics we want to start out with, as we're seeing things on TV and the news, this Israel-Hamas war. What are your thoughts? Obviously, it's a terrible tragedy what's going on, taking a human life and control of that. But in regards to how it affects the people's money, the economy, and things of that nature, what are you guys seeing, or what are you guys kind of talking about with that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's one we're hearing a lot right now. If you look at what's going on with Israel and Hamas, Israel and what's going on in Gaza, we do need to separate that humanitarian side of it from the economic, the market impact side of it, right? What I see, and I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old at home. It is tragic. It is gut-wrenching to watch what is taking place, see the images, see the impact on people that want to have nothing to do with this conflict. But if we take the emotion out of it and we say, how much exposure do we have as the U.S.? How much exposure do the companies in the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Russell 2000, their exposure is really limited. The things that could shift it, right, really what could make a change is either on the de-escalation side, if we saw Egypt get more involved and say, you know what, yep, let's open up the Sinai Peninsula. But as of right now, they said, no, we don't want anything to do with it. On the flip side, from an escalation standpoint, and this is a question we get, if this escalates, could it move oil, which could increase inflation and make the Fed's jobs harder? The two groups that could really get involved, one is Hezbollah out of Lebanon, and they have basically said so far, hey, verbally we support you, but we're not sending rockets, we're not sending people, we're not getting involved in this. And Iran, the other group that people are looking at and saying, hey, they've got resources. If they get in, that could cause a more impactful situation to arise. We have our carrier ships right outside the Strait of Hormuz, which is where Iran has their only oil export terminal. If they were to get involved, the U.S. steps in, their economy gets crushed. So as it stands right now, I'm not expecting an escalation. I'm not expecting a de-escalation. What I expect to see, and I just got to sit down the other day with a friend of mine who's former Navy SEAL trainer, worked with the CIA. He's worked in private missions over in that area. He said, look, this is going to be an extended conflict between those nations. With the tunnel systems, it's not an easy thing to fix. You're going to hear more about it on the news. I think it will continue well into next year, but the economic market impacts I expect are going to be limited.
Yeah, that was awesome. The gentleman that he's referring to is a former Navy SEAL that was, we had the opportunity to speak with him too. He's a wonderful individual. So we're so blessed to have that meeting as well. Let's change gears a little bit because, as you know, there's a 24-hour media cycle. And a lot of times I hear things getting wrong. But the concept of the money supply, in particularly in regards to breaking it down in layman's terms, regards what it means when, hey, the money supply now is tightening and how that's going to kind of affect in a brief little layman's term kind of a concept.
Yes, I mean, here's how I think about it. We've all been hearing about inflation now for 3 years, and the Fed said, don't worry about it initially. It'll be transitory. It's not going to matter. It's $4 trillion fed into our system. Obviously, they missed the boat on 2020. They missed it in 2021. Last year in 2022, they said, finally, we have to do something about it. So they said, we're going to tighten monetary policy. Now, what does that really mean for us day to day? We hear that on TV. What does that look like? Well, tighter monetary policy essentially means that they're raising interest rates to make things cost more. It's more expensive to borrow and buy a house, more expensive to borrow and buy a car, more expensive to borrow and invest in a business, put in a new plant, property, equipment, whatever that may be. The idea here is that if they want to make monetary policy loose, they bring rates down very low, they make money available, and people will spend it. It'll increase production, it'll increase demand. When you need to temper that, you make it more difficult to do all of those things. So the Fed today, we've seen 30-year mortgages exceed 8%, come down a little bit, but substantially higher than where they were 3, 4, 5 years ago. We've seen auto loan rates rise substantially, and companies, whether you're the biggest company or a small new company, these higher costs of borrowing are meant to slow down activity. The major question that people have been asking is, does it slow us to the point that we get a recession? Right? You've been hearing on TV about a recession that's been 6 months away for 18 months now. And that is still a question that's open into 2024. The Fed has not finished. And the question is, will they get even tighter? Or have they done all the rate hikes they're going to do, but now they may keep rates high? So those costs of new activity are going to remain potentially prohibitively expensive. It's something you'll hear about, I think, a lot over the next 12 months. But when you hear tight monetary policy, loose money, it's basically, is it easy to get a loan? Is money cheap to get? Or are things more expensive? That's essentially what it means.
It's funny you bring that up. That this is the most telegraphed recession that we've ever seen. So one of the things that we're big planners, so we believe in planning for everything. We're telling people today, if you're in an industry that you possibly could get affected by some volatile markets or some volatile areas, you probably should plan ahead, because to your point, it's been about 18 months now. So if you get caught on the other end of this, you probably didn't do a good job of thinking through the planning. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So the other thing that we hear a lot too is the deficit. I think it's somewhere north of 6% of GDP right now. How that impacts us. And then the other thing too is I've heard this, I think through, I don't know how long I've been doing this, 20 some odd years, maybe 27, coming up 30. It's just different this time. It's different this time. And the government's here to help you out, right? But so the two things you never want to hear. But in regards to the deficit, have we seen this before? What are you guys' thoughts process behind it? Are you worried about that, or you kind of see us navigating it through a little bit more easily?
Sure. Well, let's start with that deficit. Now, remember, the government works on a different calendar year than we do, right? We think January through December for 2023. Their calendar years go October 1st through the end of September. So 2023 is finished for the U.S. government. They are now in 2024. This is why at the beginning of October, if you turned on the TV, you were hearing about this budget showdown and whether or not they may have to shut things down if they didn't finalize a budget for the year ahead. In 2023, their year that is now finished, the deficit, how much more they spent versus what they took in, was a little over $2 trillion, 6% of GDP, which is a number. Have we ever seen a number that high? Yes. Have we seen it when we weren't in a major war, when we weren't in a significant recession? No. And we've certainly never seen it when the unemployment rate was below 4%. And now we're sitting here going into fiscal year 2024, which is an election year. And there's this question of, can we reasonably expect that they're going to be more financially responsible in the year ahead? So when we look at this and we step back, I'll be honest, I hate how much, I think it's been honestly reckless fiscal policy. I think we're loading up the credit cards, we're loading up the shelves with debt, and what that means is that we have to find ways to pay that off. It means that they're probably going to have to raise taxes. That's going to be a major discussion point in the 2024 elections. The question of, can we handle it? Can we work our way through it? History's a guide, right? Go back to World War II. We loaded the shelves with debt. And afterwards, we realized we had to get spending in check, and that's what we did. We got spending in check. We were innovative entrepreneurs. We had an industrial boom, and we slowly paid our way down. Then we got LBJ in the 1960s. We got the Great Society. We loaded up the shelves again, right? And then people got fed up. The pendulum swings politically. The pendulum swings as people get tired of poor decision making. And we reached a point in the 1970s where people said, look, if we're going to elect you to office, we are going to elect people that will take this seriously. And for 16 years, right, roughly in Washington, they really did focus on the deficit to the point that under Clinton, we ran a surplus. We started to pay it down. Right? It wasn't a quick pay down, but again, we stalled the spending increases, and we slowly paid it down. I think that's what we're going to do again this time. I think I can already see. I travel across the country. I visit about 100 cities every year. I think this year I've been in 39 different states. No matter where I go, people are getting fed up with some of the policies, and they're saying, look, we are adding debt at an unsustainable rate. And as people look out and say, I want my Social Security to be there, I want Medicare, Medicaid to be there, I want my kids and my grandkids, to be living in a world where they're not overburdened by debt, I think in the next few years, we're going to start to see the voters move on that. And will we work through it? Yes. Will we be happy that we have to pull back on certain things to do it? No. We're going to grumble. We're going to be upset. But at the end of the day, we get it done. And I think we will again. We're on the cusp of that turning point.
I would agree with that 100%. Not one of the next. Let's change the topics a little bit. So, 2023 was an interesting year, for lack of a better term. As we look back on it, well, two-part question. As we look forward, we've got a little bit more than a month and a half left here. You know, is there anything to kind of watch until the end of the year? And then looking back at the year, is there something that was like, hey, you know what, I kind of learned something different from this, or this kind of a cool takeaway that we saw, or that kind of was really interesting? They're like, hey, there's something new that I haven't seen before, or is it kind of just business as usual and just a different?
Yeah. No, great question. Let's start with the second part first. What did we learn from this year? What do we look back? What surprised people, right? That recession that was expected earlier this year, people weren't sure because we really haven't seen this much money enter the system this quickly. People weren't sure how much consumers had left in the tank. And I think this year, as we were trying to figure out why are consumers still traveling at pre-2019 levels? Why are they still eating out so much? Why are they spending? It forced us to dive deeper into the details and realize some things like mortgage rates, right? Mortgages, right? Obviously, mortgage rates rose this year. It has some impacts on housing. But, you know, people had to look back and say, hey, hold on a second. There are things that happened in 2020 and in 2021. When the 30-year mortgage rate fell below 3%, a lot of people refinanced. And the majority, unlike 04, 05, 06, when 45-ish% of the mortgages outstanding were adjustable rate and they got impacted by Fed hikes, this time roughly 95% is fixed rate. And it forced us to dive deeper into consumer balance sheets and realize they actually improved their balance sheets during COVID. They put themselves in a stronger position. Consumers today are relatively healthy. Now, the question as we look out through the end of this year, because we're hearing from Walmart, we're hearing from places like Target that consumers are getting a little more price sensitive. They're going more with store brands. You're seeing higher income earners come to shop at some of these shops, which you haven't historically seen. The thing I'm looking out for now, right, is to take that surprise from earlier in the year, the health of the consumer, the strength of the consumer, and as we go into the holiday season, we're watching employment. Are companies hiring as many seasonal workers as they have in the past? Are they expecting strength? Are consumers going to spend on Christmas presents, on travel, like they did over the last 2-3 years where they had their pocketbooks full, right, from the stimulus cash that had come in? If we see a slowdown here at the end of the year, it could be a precursor to a slowdown in the beginning of 2024. That means that the Fed's job's probably easier next year because less demand will push down inflation. The counter to that is if we see an exceptionally strong end of this year, strong holiday season, strong holiday shopping, the Fed may have more work for themselves to do in 2024, and it means that inflation fight might take longer. So watch employment, watch things like retail sales, the consumption of consumers, and quite honestly, as everyone's out there traveling, just take a look around. When you go out for dinner, when you go shop, just take a look around and you'll get a good idea of how people are acting, reacting, and whether or not people seem to still be in this spending mood. I'm excited to see how that plays out here as we close out 2023.
That's awesome. I'm getting excited just listening to you. So now let's change gears a little bit and talk about the yield curve, because I know that's all over the media today. As we go into 2024, do you see that yield curve kind of normalizing out? And then again, and I apologize for using yield curve on this call, but I know that a lot of times there's industry terms in there. Can you kind of like simplify it a little bit for the person that may have never taken a class in regards to interest rates?
Yeah. I mean, so when you think about it, just logically, if you want to borrow money for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, it should be a higher interest rate. It should cost you more to do so than if you're going to borrow it for a day, let's say, because the risk that you run into difficulty, the risk that the economy hits a recession over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years is higher than if it's going to happen in the next 24 hours. Now, when the Fed gets aggressive, when they start lifting interest rates, they have the most control in the short term because what the Fed does is they're essentially making loans available to the banks, and the banks will not set a rate on a 1 month, 3 month, 10 months, whatever it is, loan lower than what they get paid by the Federal Reserve. So in times where the Fed is acting aggressively, you have these weird environments where it costs more to borrow for 6 months than it does to borrow for 30 years. That is unusual. It's abnormal. So there's been this question of, what is it going to take to get us back to a more normal environment? And what people are watching for, and I think we will see some of this in 2024, is as inflation, which is still above trend, inflation is still around 4% if we take out the food and energy, which is super volatile month to month. They want to get it to 2. As we get close to 2, as we progress through 2024, the Fed has started to signal we're thinking about rate cuts. We're thinking about, in mid to late part of the year, starting to bring the shorter end, their rates down. And if we do that, it's it brings us back to a more normal environment. I think we will see that. I think you'll see the short-term rates start to come down, and the longer-term rates, which are pricing in, they're expecting that to happen, they're going to stay a little more static. So I think we will see some of that normalizing. We're getting back to a more stable footing. We're getting back to that type of environment that we can sustainably grow from. We're just not there yet. And so this inversion, that's what they call it, is an inversion of the yield curve where the short end is higher than the long end. Typically, that's been a signal that recession may be coming. If we are able to escape that without a recession, I think the Fed is going to view that as one of the bigger wins they've had in history.
Cool, that's awesome. Then as we kind of get close to time here, is there anything you're looking out of in the horizon? You're like, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm kind of getting excited about this. I like to try to end on a positive note,
Yeah.
There's something like, hey, this is pretty cool. This is interesting. This is something that we're excited about, that we're at first trust, we're kind of looking forward to.
Yeah, you know what gets me excited? So my mom was cleaning out the basement of my childhood home about a month or two ago, and she came across some newspaper. She had wrapped some stuff up, and it was a newspaper article. It was an ad from a very big computer retailer, we'll just say it at that, from 1999. And she said, look at this. And think about this. This is 20 years ago. On the front page of that ad, you had a 3-pack of VHS tapes for $6.99 with a $6.99 mail-in rebate. You had Kodak film camera, right? 99 cents, but it was limit 3 per customer because everybody wanted film for the holidays. They had a $400 camcorder, a 5-disc CD changer, but the number one item, the thing people were most excited about in 1999 was this computer. We were going into the internet age. We were on the cusp of unlocking this brand new world. And as we sat there in 99, for $999, you could buy a computer with 16 megabytes of memory, 2 gigabytes of hard drive space, a 14-inch tube monitor, and they also had a deal that you could tie in a 56K modem. You could buy that 56K modem, go surf online as long as, nobody else picked up the phone at your house. And I started thinking about this, and I'm like, wow, in 23 years, we have come a heck of a long way. I went and looked at the latest ad from that same retailer, right? Black Friday this year. You can get, first off, there was no VHS. There was no Kodak film. There was no camcorder. There was no 5-disc CD changer, but there was a cell phone on their front page, which does everything that all of those do for cheaper and for better. But one of the things that hit me, they had a computer. And it was a 12 gigabytes of memory, 512 gigabytes of storage. It's got a 15-inch. It's a laptop. It's portable. And I started thinking about this progress that we have seen in technology. And I looked at things like the televisions from then to now. And what I realized is that our luxury items 20 years ago have now become commonplace items, not just here domestically, but around the world. As I look out and I look at other economies, emerging markets, growing markets, places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and as we sit here today, we've got more people, okay, in the year 2000, right, 99, 2000, there was 4 to 5 billion people on the face of this earth. Now we just passed 8 billion. I start diving into those stats and I said, wow, they've got much better tools. What else do they have? Their literacy rate today is substantial. In 1963, for the first time ever in history, we passed 50%. Today, we're around 90%. And you stop and you think about this. The tools that we have available to us, the resources, not just here in the United States, but in these countries where they are still in that development phase growing, we have more people than ever working on problems. And they've got better access to information than the president of the United States had back in 1999. They have tools that the president couldn't access. in 1999. And when I sit here and we close out this year and we've there was Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas, I'm just sitting here kind of in awe of how much has taken place in the last 20, 30 years, and this unleashing of human potential that is taking place in the world today that is not getting enough credit. We focus on the wars. We focus on political strife. We focus, next year's an election year. There's going to be bickering, arguing, anger's going to rise. But never lose sight of what is taking place in the world around us, because we are doing near miraculous things. Our progress on health, our progress on sanitation, our progress on people having enough food to eat. We have never, ever, ever, ever in the history of this world been at a better spot. And those people that are better fed, those people that have better access to medicine, that are living longer, are better educated, have more information, they're going to be doing amazing things as we fight the world's problems. So I'm excited. The more I look back, sometimes we just have to take that pause. We forget how far we've come because we take new technologies for granted. Now that we've had the iPhones in our pockets for 16 years, we forget the time before that, but it wasn't that long ago. And these tools have me very excited for the world that my 6-year-old, my 9-year-old are going to grow up into. I think it's going to be fantastic.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it was funny. I actually have an 8-year-old child, and I'm unusual because I'm in my 50s and I have an 8-year-old child. So when I talked to her about the different things when we were growing up, it's night and day. But we were trying to explain to her what Encyclopedia Britannica was. And the fact that,
Yeah.
this is how you had to get your data from the world. You had to trust that that data was correct when you're doing
Right.
your report. Well, now you can, to your point, you can fact check 15 different things and 15 different sources
Right.
on your cell phone, in regard to, which was never accurate. So I agree 100% with that statement. I agree 100% with you. So I want to thank you so much, you and First Trust, Andrew, for taking time out of your day to talk with us. And again, First Trust has been a phenomenal partner for us. Again, our goal with these calls is to let you guys know who we're talking to in regards to helping us make decisions in regards to becoming stewards of your money. We take that very highly, and we appreciate you guys allowing us to do that. And I know Andrew probably would reiterate that verbiage too. So again, thank you everybody so much.